since Harsha's told you how to think about it, I think I'll just stick with what the law itself is and why we have reached the point that we have reached. So we'll just start from now. Like what is in this law? What makes this law different from the earlier law, and how did we reach this point? So the first thing is, what is this law about? The 1986 law is being completely revamped and redone and basically replaced. Although they call it an amendment act, it's basically replacing the earlier law. So there was a 1986 act which dealt only with the prohibition of child labour in certain occupations and employments, and it also said that it would regulate the work that would happen in other employments. So the 1986 Act was looking at what is hazardous and what is not alright, what is the kind of occupation in which you should never find children. But it allowed for work in all those which were not specifically mentioned. And like Harsh said, that over the past 30 years, there has been a systematic attempt by child rights activists and by people working in the field to keep expanding, the categories where children should not be allowed to work. And that had reached quite some proportion. 80, how many did you say, Harsh? 83. So by then people had stopped keeping count of what it was, which basically meant two things. One is that in the part that you had in the law on prohibition and regulation, regulation was a complete zilch. Regulation didn't happen at all, and if you look at the history of how this law has not worked, you'll find that regulation has been virtually non-existent, and that's the story of labour legislation in this country, and that's certainly the story when it comes to children who are not given, in any case, the agency, whose agency to speak up for themselves is not recognized by us, and who've not been able to unionize. None of the things that adult labour could do, child labour has ever been able to do. So it's always had to be through organizing rather than unionizing, which means that there's no bargaining power that exists with children. So children are, in that sense, very easy to exploit. The only way that it would not have happened was if the state took its regulation role seriously. So one axiom that I think we have now to contend with, that axiom is this, that in this country regulation never works. And so we've got to look somewhere else for what we do, which is one of the reasons that child labour activists constantly kept saying, we don't want all this business of you can work here but you can't work there, children can work in these establishments but not in other establishments. Children can work, in fact the Supreme Court gave a decision in 1991 to 91 sometime. They gave a decision saying that in a match factory, they cannot work in any other department, but they can work in the packaging department. Children can work in the packaging department because that is not hazardous. There's no hazard problem there. So they should be allowed to work there but not anywhere else. So this reductionist approach to why child labour is a problem has been there throughout for the 1986 Act. Now we come to a time where you make the change. So what they've done is that there are two kinds of, two categories. The 1986 Act only talked about children, which meant children below the age of 14. This Act has decided that it is going to state that child labour is hereafter abolished. So if you abolish child labour, what do you do with the law? You just have to have one statement saying that you've abolished child labour, but plainly that's not what you're doing. So you introduce something else which is completely irrelevant to the way in which the law has developed on every other front, which is you introduce the idea of the adolescent into child labour. Now, by itself, it's not a bad idea. If you're willing to accept that all persons below the age of 18 are children and require special protection, that might have been a good idea. Because we've been saying, in fact, if you look at the Juvenile Justice Act, all the debates that have been going on around it. So the idea that children below 18 have to be treated separately from adults is not such a bad idea. But what do? They say there is a distinction we make between child, who is below 14, and adolescent between the ages of 14 and 18. Now, if they were advancing the law on adolescents by bringing them into this context of child labour, it might still have made some sense. But if they are in fact retarding the idea of adolescent work, then obviously the objective is something different. So if you look at who were these people between the ages of 14 and 18 who were allowed to work, you will find that the three categories that are mentioned here are very interesting. First, they say mines. No child can work in a mine. That is already there in our Mines Act. We didn't really need to create another legislation for us to say the children should not work in mines. The second is that they should not work where there are explosives and inflammable substance. And the third is that they should not work where there are hazardous occupations and hazard as in the Factories Act. This is really diabolically cruel almost. Because if you look at the Factories Act talks about hazardous occupations only in relation to those provisions which were introduced into that law because of the Bhopal gas disaster. So it's only in that context that they talk about hazardous occupation, hazardous processes. So hazard there is about the kind of hazard that was seen in toxic, deeply toxic, dangerous factories. And that's the only place where this law now says, but actually if you look at the Factories Act says that no one below the age of 14 shall work. Between the ages of 14 and 18, the Factories Act regulates how they will work, which is not only about a regulator coming in. They say that between the ages of 14 and 15, they have to test, a certified medical practitioner will have to test to see whether the child is capable of doing that work which is being given to them, because they can be given adult work. If they can be given adult work, will they be capable of doing that work? Bodily, are they developed enough? Are they nourished enough? Are they capable of doing that work physically? That has to be, and psychologically, that has to be decided by a certified medical practitioner. They have to carry a certificate of fitness on them to say that they have been certified to be fit to do this work. So there are protections that were built into a 1948 Act, which is now being reversed by saying that we are only concerned about hazardous occupations even in factories, and we are not concerned beyond that. So I think I'll just stop there and go to the beginning to say where all we have our problems. So let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution is our first problem. In many other things in our fundamental rights is that we are able to find something that is okay for us. But you look at what the Constitution says. Article 23, it does not prohibit the employment of child labor. It only says that they should not work in hazardous occupations in a way which might be detrimental to their health. So otherwise, per se, the Constitution does not prohibit child labor. So that's our first problem. The second problem that the Constitution poses is it says that children up to the age of 14 will be given free education. All of them should have education. What was the logic of 14? And when we brought in our amendment to our Constitution, we said children between the ages of 6 and 14 will be entitled to education. What is the logic of 6 and 14? The only place where it is possible to find a relationship to produce that logic is in relation to labor. If you look at labor legislations, they said between the ages of 0 and 6, wherever there are 30 women working in any factory, they should provide a creche for the child. So between the ages of 0 and 6 will be creche. Between the ages of 6 and 14, they may work. They can work in non-hazardous occupations. They may work in not prohibited occupations. After the age of 14, they can legally work everywhere. This has been the way in which our Constitution spoke about it, our law spoke about it, and that was bad enough, I thought. Then we had two legislations that predated the Constitution, which continued on till after the Constitution. Both are very important for us. The first is a 1938 Employment of Children Act, where there was a prohibition. The same kind of thing, the 1986 Act, is more or less a replica of what you had in the 1938 Act. Why did they need to reproduce that? Why did they need to redo the same thing in another form in 1986? Because in 1986, India was emerging into the global world. India needed to make sure that it was in keeping with the social clause that was being brought in by the ILO. And so we had to show that we were doing something for our children. We just took that earlier legislation, tapped it into a slightly different shape and reproduced that legislation. So there's really nothing much that was done by the 1986 law. There was another legislation that was there in 1933 where parents were punished if their children were given for purposes of employment to anybody else. So earlier, prior to the Payment of Wages Act and all of that, it used to be that people would get employed with employers for a period of a year. And then 11 months they'll work continuously. 1 month, because a lot of it used to be migrant workers. People used to migrate from one place to another. They used to migrate as families. They used to send their children out to work. Because there would be agents who would go and pick all these people and take them out to work. So 11 months they'll work. In the 12th month they'll be allowed to go back home, at which time the payments will be made. That was the arrangement at that time. And that was seen, this idea of selling the labor of children and selling the children therefore for that period of time was seen as an offense. And so in 1933 they brought in a legislation which criminalized this. It was a huge problem because you are making the person who is the victim of poverty into the victim of the law also. You're making the child's parent, into someone who will be brought within this law and punished. So obviously the push to make that law act, to activate the law was minimal. Nobody really cared to make that law active, and therefore it stayed on the statute book, but punishing parents stayed on the statute book for quite a while. But once the Child Labour Act came in after that, and then the 1986 Act came in, that changed. They stopped talking about punishing the parent till 2016. Now they are back again to punishing parents who permit their children to go and work. Against this law, if a child goes to work, the parent, and of course this law, you can see the shoddiness and irresponsibility in the way they've made this law. They refer to parents and guardian is nowhere defined. Anybody could be a guardian, no one may be a guardian. So the idea of a guardian is nowhere defined. Family is defined as father, mother, sister, brother, father's brother, father's sister, mother's brother, mother's sister. So they've expanded the categories of people who can use these children along with them to do work and call it a family enterprise. So now they have reintroduced the idea that the parent or the guardian can be punished under this law if they permit their child to act. So you are now talking not about, parents no longer have anything to gain by this law becoming active. Children have no longer anything to gain by this law becoming active, because their parents themselves might get punished under this law if they are found working. The employer, the agent is not even recognized in this law. There are agents who go and pick up children. These are facts. These are things that have been noticed time and again by various people and various committees, but this is not even acknowledged. All that they do is to say that if an employer employs a person, or if a parent or guardian permits a child to work, they will be equally punished. So the employer and the parent of the poor child will be equally punished under this law. So you can imagine the extent to which the seriousness exists in this. In 1986, when they brought in the law, they said that it's an interesting law. I'm going to just dwell on that for a little bit, just to tell you how these laws get made and what is this child labour business. In 1985, there was a debate that went on in our midst. And there were at that time some NGOs who felt that it is unrealistic to do away with child labour altogether. That if you try to do away with child labour, you may end up not achieving anything. So there was one set of people, I think CACL, which they therefore worked on a legislation and produced a draft legislation which they felt should be adopted. In that legislation they said all children must be sent to school, but children can be allowed to work so long as they have gone to school and they come back and they can work for a limited number of hours. So maybe they can work for 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever. But they should go to school. So employers will also be responsible for ensuring that these children go to school, but they should come back, they may work, but when they work, the employer is responsible for their education. They have to make sure that happens. So it was some kind of an uneasy compromise that they said. This is in the 1985, so it is much before liberalization and all of this started, where the state was still somewhat a welfare state, but the state activism was very low. So the group felt that we can't penalize them for going to work. Let them go to work, but let the employer take the responsibility of making sure that the child goes to school. In 1986, when they brought in the law, they did away with all that. They just said we have two kinds of things that we are going to consider. One, we will concern ourselves with abolition, that is prohibition, and we will talk about regulation. What is very interesting about the 1986 law is there were already other laws like the Factories Act, like the Mines Act, which already existed, and the Factories Act especially, which had developed somewhat, which dealt with how you will regulate in a factory. What are the kinds of registers they need to keep? Who can come in and inspect? What can be seen as a problem? In fact, after the Bhopal gas disaster, they also said that workers themselves should be allowed to raise a complaint, which did not exist before. Workers did not have a right to raise any complaint. So there were changes like that had come in. The 1986 law, however, just short-circuited all of that. And there's health, safety and welfare provisions in the Factories Act. They just shrunk all that and gave subtitles to each of these and said all of these need to be taken care of. That's all. You must give them, latrines, water, ventilation, humidification, whatever there is, just like subtitles. So the dramatic non-seriousness when it comes to employing children and providing conditions of work which have to be prescribed by an inspector or an inspectorate, all that got wiped out. So they not only therefore made a difference between the rich child and the poor child, they also made a distinction between the adult worker and the child worker. They said the child worker will go and work, we are not going to pay any serious attention to the conditions of work of that child worker. We will talk about regulation, which will depend upon the regulator, but the conditions of work were not considered even then. This is 86. Then after that, there was a case that was filed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court considered it. There were two separate cases. One of the cases is what I told you about the Shivakashi the match factories, where they made a distinction between hazardous work and non-hazardous work within the factory. And they said that which is non-hazardous within the factory, like packaging, it's all right for children to work. So the court itself there made a distinction between the poor child and other children. One quirky thing that happened during this time was many of you may have seen this book called The Child and the State in India. What's that man's name? Myron Weiner's book, Child and the State in India. Now after this book came out, there was a big debate that went on in our midst. Now this book, one of its central theses was that if you want to get rid of child labor, all children must be made to go to school. And so schools were to become the repository of child labor. Now the way the debate went, and I blame the book to a certain extent at least, and the kind of debates that went around it was as if schools were just a place where children who were laboring should be picked up and put in. Schools stopped having value. Now we know that in Tamil Nadu, I come from Tamil Nadu, and I know that in the early years, schools were used as the place where the midday meal scheme could be implemented. Now the idea of the midday meal scheme, partly at least, was that once you have a midday meal scheme, children will come to the school and then you can impart education to them. It wasn't that you just convert that into just a place where you play your politics out. But that's how it got reduced. Similarly, after Myron Weiner's book and that discussion, it was like schools are important because when we want to end child labor, we must pick up all these children. They must be somewhere where they have to go. If we stop them being laboring children, then they'll be out on the street. That's not acceptable, so they should be picked up and put into schools. This is, to my mind, this is one of the reasons that the idea of the school is so distorted. Even after our Right to Education Act has come in, it's distorted for this reason, and we haven't recovered from the kind of debates that happened in the 90s. Then you had the second National Commission on Labour. Now, look at the way these things get turned around. In the National Commission on Labour, the second National Commission on Labour, there were many study groups that were set up, and they were all, different groups were given the task of studying various kinds of things. So there was one group which classically was on women and children. You know how it is, no? Women are children, children are women, I don't know, whatever. So they just clubbed these two together. They said women and children. The part that they did on child labor is an interesting one because they also gave a model law that could be made to deal with this question of child labor. And they also made that link between the school and child labor. In that they said that if a child does not go to school, first of all they said every child must have access to a school of quality in their neighborhood, and that's an important part of how you're going to deal with the issue. Then they said every child must go to school. if the school does not exist, or if a child is not going to school because of whatever, because of the circumstances in the school, the administration, the local administration would be held liable under that law. So they were asking that if you don't provide the facility, where will children go? How will they go anywhere at all? So they put the onus on the administrator, local administrator, the district administrator, and said that if there isn't a sufficient, if there isn't sufficient quality and a good school for a child to go to, then the local administrator will be held responsible. This is what was submitted to the National Commission of Labour. When the National Commission of Labour took that study and then adopted it into its report, it changed the critical things. First of all, it took away the responsibility, and they also have a draft model legislation. They took away the responsibility of the local administrator. So, whichever child, whichever parent, they have to find the school, they have to find the quality, it's their business to send the child, or else. Why or else? Because not only did they absolve the local administration, they also said that the parent of the child who does not go to school, the child who does not go to school, would be held liable under that law. This is the way in which laws have been made to put more and more onus, more and more pressure, adding more and more criminality to the lives of the poor. This is not new, but the way in which it is being done now, it is as if, this is the first time that I am seeing a law that is not even pretending to care. That's what makes this law different from other laws. It's not like the other laws care, it's not as if they regulated. In fact, if you look at the 1986 Act, you had an earlier legislation, right? And there too you had this provision where you said you could add more to the schedule. In the early 80s when the Asiad work was on, and then you had this, I forget, one of the dam projects which was there, they found that children were working in these projects. Salal hydroelectric project. And then you had the Asiad workers here. They found that there were a large number of children who were working in the construction area, because all this had to do with construction. And when the court heard the matter, among the things that they found was that construction is actually hazardous work. Although it is not mentioned as prohibited activity for children in the law, since the law deals with prohibiting children working in hazardous work, they should not be allowed to work in the construction industry. So they had introduced this into the law through a court order, saying that construction industry will be treated as hazardous, you cannot have children there. Now all of that is gone. Because now what they've done is they've said, okay, we have already said in this law, in the new law, we've already said that children below 14 are not to work. So we don't need to worry about that at all. We will only worry about adolescents and where they should or should not work. But what have they also said? They have said that children below the age of 14 may work if they are working as part of a family enterprise. A family enterprise is where members of the family are working. So like Harsh was saying, you can have, of course all people are talking about BD rolling, they're talking about all of that. But there is almost in anything, like say brick kilns, they can be asked to. They can be asked to work anywhere so long as they have somebody who they can call a relative. Why this becomes significant is also because this exception that is made in this law to working with the family was also there in the 1986 law before it got amended. It was already there. But it was narrower. First of all, it was narrower. It didn't have this grand thing of, our Indian family extends beyond father, mother, son and daughter. It also goes to my father's sister and my mother's sister and my father's brother and my mother's brother. This vague, unexplained category of people who, why grandfather, grandmother are not family. What are we saying? Brother-in-law is not family. Then we are all family. What's the big deal? So there is a way in which, that's why I'm saying the casualness with which this law has been made tells you that they don't seriously intend. It doesn't matter. Have they had any regulation between 2000 and now? 2000 I'm saying because the Juvenile Justice Act came in after that. There are many things that they could do to help children who are in need of care and protection. You could have used the Juvenile Justice Act. Has it ever been done? No. We've been resisting forever and ever under the Child Rights Convention. When the provision that exists on child labor, we've been saying, no, we don't want to be a part of that. India doesn't want to sign on to that, so they're making an exception of it. Now you say, okay, I'll pass a law which says that children below 14 cannot work, and then I'll say, I have complied with the rights Convention on the Rights of the Child. But you're making, and in the 1986 Act, when they had that exception which was narrower, even in that people found That children, for instance, getting, working in Davas, working in glass factories, working just about anywhere, they'll say, "Mera batija hai, mera so and so hai." That's it, it's family. This was the exception that allowed for exploitation of child labor. They have done nothing to change this. Now we also need to contextualize it. I mean, why this is so disturbing is because when you look at what the context is, look at what is being done with labor law generally. The first set of reforms that they wanted in labor law, that industry wanted in labor legislation, they wanted trade union strength to be cut. They wanted the various kinds of social security protections that workers had to be reduced. They wanted hire and fire to be introduced. They wanted the contractualization of labor to be introduced. They wanted the responsibility of the occupier. After the Bhopal gas disaster, they changed the definition of occupier. They wanted that to be restored to the old thing where somebody in the factory can be given the responsibility of being the occupier and be answerable for anything that goes wrong in the plant. This is the kind of thing that they were looking for in the first round of reforms, which lasted for about 15 years. What have they been asking for now and what are they getting? The most important thing that they are saying is that we do not want three things. One is we do not want to be reporting to the state. We don't want the state to come in and check if we are keeping our records properly, what we are doing. Get off our backs. We will just do self-certification all the time. So we don't want regulation by the state. Get off. The government has already caved in to much of that. Even in terms of payment of wages, they have caved in. To say that, okay, we will not come in your way. But they've gone one step further. They are not only not going to regulate, they have said that, they say this is harassment. To have regulators come in and look at the way factories are working or what is happening in these plants, that is harassment. So you must allow, for instance, a computer to randomly select 2 factories maybe. And they will go there on that date, check that and come back. So if you as a worker or if you as somebody who's in a vicinity or as a trade unionist or as an activist or whatever, go and tell the inspector that, listen, in that factory, there is something that's going seriously wrong. He will say, I'm sorry, but I can't go till the computer throws up that factory's name. Otherwise, I will be seen as corrupt. So they have said that you cannot go, you cannot regulate. They are reducing the ability to regulate dramatically. And why are they saying that? They're saying because all these regulators are corrupt and therefore we should tie their hands. If we don't tie their hands, they put their hands out and get money and therefore we should not allow. So they backed off on regulation. But they've gone one step further. What are they saying now? They're not only saying that, they're also saying that if by chance, if you cross all of this and some employer, somebody who's running a plant, somebody who's running a factory, is found to have done something in opposition to the law, right? It's an offense under the law. What is an inspector or a regulator supposed to do? Normally, if you commit a wrong, you'll have to go through the process of law, right? Now the process of law changes. The regulator is no longer an inspector, not a regulator. The regulator will be a facilitator. What will they be facilitating? They will facilitate the person, that is the person who's broken the law, they will facilitate their adherence to the law. So they will go and tell them, boss, you know what, you've actually broken the law. So you should not have done this. Let me help you in not breaking the law. So prosecution is not going to be the route, facilitation is going to be the route for lawbreakers. I really want to know when they're going to do that for all of us, because many of us are experimenting with life and we want to be allowed a few mistakes here and there, but that's not allowed for us. It's fine when it is done by them. Now this new legislation, which deals with child labor, says that other than the actual direct employment of child labor or of adolescents in a way in which the law does not permit, if any other breaking of rules, law, anything else happens, the employer, the accused person, can compound the offense. They can go to the district magistrate and say, you know what, I want to compound it. You tell me how much I have to pay and let's get past this. And the state government can figure out how much they need to ask them to pay. And they just pay that money and then that's it, it's closed. So this idea of compounding offenses under this law, they are openly saying, and this is a part of the law, this may have been happening in practice before, now it's a part of the law that a person who's accused of an offense under this law, which, when you think about anything other than permitting child labor or employing child labor, it means that parents are not the problem. It is the employers who are the problem, will be the accused. And you're saying that when the employer makes a mistake and is accused, he just has to pay up. He has to find out how much do you want me to pay the money, and that's it. So there is a way in which the wrongs that are happening in the system, which is dealing with labor, and in this case with child labor, are being recast as not wrongs but as practices. You just want to help them change their practice a little here and there. You don't want to punish them. In the case of parents, they've said that if a parent is found to have permitted their child to be working somewhere, then the first time they are found, it will be treated as a first offense and they can be let off. But if they are found doing it a second time and a third time, then they will be punished under this law. What is the punishment? From 6 months to 2 years. In fact, from 1 year. For a repeat offense, it will be up to 1 year. 20,000 rupees to 50,000 rupees fine. Who are you asking to pay this? The parent. And why is the parent in that position at all? Because the child is being forced to go to work. So that's one. And the other thing is, when you make a law, see, we had a law in the 1930s, we had a law that was made again in 1980s, they are thinking of making a law again now. Won't you at least look at what is the history, what is our experience with the working of the law? There is nothing in this law which tells us what the experience is. They don't tell us what has been the experience that has allowed them to expand this category of family. They don't tell us why it continues to be all right for family, to work with the family enterprise being all right. They don't tell us why they are shrinking this idea of hazardous occupation for 14 to 18 to just these three categories. They tell us nothing. And remember that in law, a later legislation will supersede an earlier legislation. So your Factories Act may be saying, there is something ridiculous happening in a different context. I don't know if you followed this. It's a completely different context, but I'll just tell you because I know in JNU you're interested in everything, so I'm going to tell you this. But you had an amendment in 2013 to the criminal law, right? Now in that criminal law, you know that there is this idea of marital rape. Marital rape is rape only if it is to a person less than 12 years. And it has to be, it has to be rape. Now the definition of rape has been expanded, and it includes not only sexual intercourse, it also includes sexual acts. Now they've said, if a person is not below 12 and is a wife, and any act of sexual intercourse or of any sexual act is committed on that person as defined in that law, then the husband he'll get away with it because it is permitted by the law. So something that, earlier it was only penile penetration that used to be rape. Now any other kind of violation of the woman's body, many other categories are also included in this idea of rape. And now they say that all these acts, which may include pushing a bottle up a vagina, which may include a range of things which we know keeps happening all the time, all those, when a husband does it to a wife, it will be exempt. It is permitted for him to do it by the law, according to them. Earlier it would go under 377, which would be an unnatural offense that was committed on the wife. Today it will be legal for a man to do whatever he wants. That's now pending challenge. There is in Karnataka High Court and Delhi High Court and all of that. When laws are made and they don't watch what they are doing, they don't care enough about the subject that they are dealing with, this is the kind of law you'll end up with. This is not what was recommended by anybody. They passed it on their own. Similarly, you find that in this law, I just read the law again and again to see where do I see the seriousness in this law. Are they serious about any of this? And I'll just give you a small story on what happened in the 1986 Act to show you how these laws get made. See, in 1986 when they passed the law, they said whatever regulation, prohibition, all that. And then towards the end on section 24, they said in the Plantation Labour Act, in plantations labour, children below the age of 12 were prohibited from working. And in the Plantations Labour Act, you also had a provision which said that the employer will have to make provision for education for children on his plantation between the ages of 6 and 12. They would be on the plantation because, again, this is migrant workers and the parents would be there. They would be working in that plantation. The children would have to be, their education up to the age of between 6 and 12 would have to be taken care of by the plantation owner. Now they bring in a Child Labour Act. This is from 1951? Yeah, 51. 1986 they bring in a child labour law. And they decide that what they are going to achieve is uniformity. So they say in all laws which deal with child labour, child means below 14. So in the Plantations Labour Act also they say, anyone below from 12, you change that to 14. Then very simply they say, Section 24 of the Plantations Labour Act stands repealed. What is Section 24 of the Plantations Labour Act? It says that no child shall be employed in plantations, which means child labour is prohibited in plantations. Now the Child Labour Act, which comes in 1986, repeals that provision. Why does it repeal that provision? Because it says, oh, we are taking on ourselves in this law, 1986 law, we are taking the responsibility of defining all those areas where children should not be prohibited from working. So we don't need to mention it there. We'll see what we do in this schedule. In the schedule to the Child Labour Act of 1986, plantation work is not mentioned because they do not see plantation labour as being hazardous occupation. So they take a step back. This is how our law on child labour has happened throughout. They take a step back on it and therefore legalize the employment of children on plantations. Something that was not permitted till 1986 becomes permitted in 1986. In 1951, when they had the Plantations Labour Act, they had prohibited the employment of children. In the 1960s, there was the first National Commission on Labour. They had looked at the plantations and they had said, oh, this is terrible. Every plantation is flouting the law on the employment of child labour. They should be punished for it. But what did they do instead? In 86, they legalized what was illegal. And so wipe away the sins that has been committed over 35 years. This is the treatment of poor children in this country. This is not an aberration. The only difference, of course, after that what happened is that there was an outcry and many of us spoke up. And then in 2001, without telling anybody, and it took a lot of hunting to figure out where they made the change, they changed it and they repealed Section 24 of the Child Labour Act of 1986. So anybody who's done law will have to sit and figure out, when you repeal a repeal, does the original act revive or does it not? So it's one of those legal puzzles that we can work with for the rest of our lives. But it's interesting that they did not do it in an amendment that was made to the Child Labour Act. They did it in what is called a Repeals and Savings Law, Repeal and Amendment Act, which gives you some 150 legislations. In that, they say, one of some 100, the 100th entry in that is Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act. And they say Section 24 stands repealed. Nobody knew about it for the longest time. So you can have laws which you don't know about. I'm talking about the sheer callousness and the non-seriousness when it comes to child labour. You tell me, we brought in all these Daba work has been prohibited for a long time now. It's at least 5, 6, 7 years since it got prohibited. Has anyone in this room who has not seen a child who works in a Daba? Even one person? Any of you has not seen a child who works in a Daba? Everybody sees. All of us see them. They exist openly. They are not hidden. We've talked earlier in other forums about how you invisibilize people. There is no invisibilizing there. They are open there for you to see. When we were teaching in labour law in the Indian Law Institute, there was a person who came from the labour ministry. Nice chap. That's the time that they were having crackdown on, because in a second decision that the Supreme Court made, they said, you can't have child labour being employed like this, especially in hazardous industries, prohibited industries. So do something about it. So for about 6 months to a year, there was some kind of activity. So then it died off. So he came, this was one of those persons who was involved in that exercise where they were trying to crack down on child labour. He came to teach child labour law to the students of labour law. He takes the course and he comes out and we are talking and he says, and I said, I'm really glad you're teaching this child labour. It's a good thing, we can't allow this to continue. Or else we are going to have generations of people who will not only not have a childhood but will not have an adulthood. Because many, if you look, you'll find that many of those who start work as child labor, by the time they are 35, they are finished. Either their eyes won't work or various kinds of things that happen. They are so it's not just a childhood that they lose their adulthood too. So he said, it's a good thing you've been doing this. And he said, yes, Ushaji, but we can't really do anything about this. I don't know what that we are doing. He's a well-meaning fellow, but he says, I'm not going to do anything about it when I shut up because this is not workable. In this country, the poor children have to work. And they will work. And we shouldn't stop them. This is of the administrator. His job is not to judge. His job is to implement. And he says, not only does he say that there's no point in implementing, there is no consequence on him for not implementing the law. This is why in the second National Labour Commission, when they said that you're going to punish people, punish the administration for not making the provision, when they took away that, when the commission itself did not adopt that formula, it's serious. We never ever have sanctions for our administrators for non-performance. And it doesn't seem to matter at all. One of the most tragic things, like you were saying in this thing in Shivakashi again, you see that starkly there, so I'm using that as an example. You see that all around us. You go to Rohtak, you're going to see it. You go to Meerut, you'll see it everywhere. But when you go there, you'll find that the employers of child labor are running informal schooling, given protection by the state and funds by the state and by ILO, to run informal schooling systems for children who they themselves are employing. So you break the law on the one hand, and then you get yourself great credibility by saying that I am the one who's helping children get educated on the other, and no administrator interferes with this. In that process, we also had a discussion once with with collectors and with the employers. So in one of those meetings, one employer, he must have had, either he had a sense of humor or he was ridiculous, because he said, we can give you a solution. You only want to abolish child labor. No problem. We'll abolish child labor. Very good. So how are you going to achieve that? He said, just change the law and say anyone below 10 years will be child, not 14 years. We will employ children only from 10 onwards. This was allowed to be part of a conversation where none of the employers after that was held accountable for the employment of children in hazardous occupations. Now, we are not just talking about employing them in hazardous occupations, fireworks, match industry. So when we are looking at the current law, I think we need to see therefore two, three things. One is that there is a very, very clear attempt to criminalize the poor. The parent will be criminalized, the parent will be held responsible for the poverty of their child, and they are going to be held primarily accountable, so that the one person who may be helped by the law will find that it is not worth their while to be helped by the law. So they will not have any incentive at all to get the law to act. The second thing that you see here is that the general trend in labor law which you see today, it is even worse than UPA. I mean, UPA 2 I thought was horrible, but this is even worse because now they are asking all state governments to go ahead and do whatever it is that they want to do, where they are making labor inspectors and regulators into facilitators for companies, not for the people who are getting affected by by the breaking of the law, but for companies and for employers and for their managers. And this is about offences which are committed, which will then be pardoned by these fellows. Not even pardoned, they'll act as facilitators. Pardon is too big. They'll tell them, okay, really sorry, will you please give something, and then we'll take care of it. So this is the attitude and treatment that's being offered to them. And the third thing to look at is this, wishing away of the idea of child labor. The way they've done this law, it is as if, we've said that there no more, child labor can't be employed anywhere, only in family enterprise. So now we are going to pretend that child labor is fully abolished. We'll worry now about adolescents. If they're really worried about the adolescent, one question they would have to ask is it enough in today's time and age, whatever the constitution may have said in the directive principles there, is it okay in today's time and age to say that you will have education up to the age of 14 and then they can start working in most occupations? Is it all right? And that question they are deliberately not asking. And they are not asking either why education should be between 6 and 14, what happens to below 6, which is the creche category, where you put them off and you relegate them to something else. The idea of having a schedule which has just three things where adolescents cannot be employed, and not incorporating in it any of the protections that especially the Factories Act produces, I'm unable to see that as innocent. It is a deliberate omission that has been made, which puts adolescents at greater risk than they were before this law was brought. Before this law was brought, if you talk about the Factories Act, the multiple protections under the Factories Act would have applied to the children. Now you pull them out of there and put them into this and said they will only follow this regulation, not that regulation. So when we are looking at this child labour amendment, it is not just about child labour, it is about creating classes of labour. It's about a changed relationship between the state and the poor and the state and corporate entities. And if you look, you'll find that they also have a small industries law where they're saying let's do away with with all kinds of. They should be able to hire and fire, pick up who they want, do what they want, pay them as they want. The state should not interfere, because that is the idea, new idea of enterprise, of innovation, of enterprise. So who pays for this enterprise? Who pays for this innovation? It's a question that's being answered by laws like this. So please, when you read this legislation, don't just see it as child labour, because our child labour law has forever been bad. It's just that our child labour is being very plainly, we're being told that child labour is about poor people, and poor people better take care of their own legality. The state is not going to take responsibility.